Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Women of Golf Show. I'm Ted Odorico, and joining me is LPGA professional Cindy Miller, and we are your hosts. We're broadcasting live every Tuesday morning from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the blogtalkradio.com network, bringing you some of the best golfers, teacher professionals, and entrepreneurs helping to elevate women's golf. We're so glad you decided to join us this morning, so grab your coffee and let's get started. All right, good morning, and thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning here on the Women of Golf Show. I'm Ted Odorico, as mentioned, and right alongside, of course, is none other than Legends Tour player and LPGA professional Cindy Miller, and we are your hosts here on the Women of Golf. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning, Ted. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Welcome back. We were just talking about that before we went live. You've been off for a couple of weeks doing some wonderful things. Catch us up. What's been going on?
Well, I was in Orlando at Shingle Creek at the LPGA National Summit and at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony, of which I was not a part of, but I saw two wonderful women get inducted into the Hall of Fame who are very well deserving. And we had about 150 LPGA professionals and partners, and we learned all kinds of good things so we can take our students to the next level. It was great.
Very
and then
good.
I did a boot camp. I had,
wow.
Yeah, some women that needed to be abused a little bit and learn how to get better. We had a great time.
Yeah. I don't know how you managed to squeeze all of that in, but you're the best, Cindy Miller. Let me tell you, you managed to get a lot of work done in a short period of time. But it's glad to have you back here joining me on air. All right, as most of you that tuned in last week, of course, we were going to have a very special guest, Mike Nichols, the Chief Business Officer for the Symetra Tour. Regrettably, he was not able to join us, but managed to get us a fill-in, Dean Schneider, who was a great guest. But Mike has very graciously agreed to come back this week, and we're going to do a season wrap-up, if you will, of the Symetra Tour and talk about maybe some things happening for the 2020 season as well. So, Cindy, let's welcome our very special guest, Mike Nichols.
Good morning.
It's good to be. Thank you. It's good to be here. Sorry, couldn't make it last week, and hopefully it's worth the wait.
Always worth it. Always worth it, Mike. We appreciate it very much. So let's start off with just, if you don't mind, maybe a look back to this season here. Kind of give us, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just a little bit of an assessment, if you an overall assessment of the 2019 season.
Sure, and for your listeners who may not necessarily be attuned to exactly the Symetra Tour and how it works, just give a little bit of background on the tour itself. So a lot of folks are familiar with the men's Korn Ferry Tour, what used to be the WOG.com Tour. So the Symetra Tour is the LPGA's equivalent to what takes place over on the men's side there, but we're a little bit different in that the top 10 players from the season money list graduate directly onto the LPGA Tour. Over there on the Web.com Tour, Korn Ferry Tour now, they kind of have a playoffs, and they kind of jumble the top players up, and they got to sort of reseed themselves. I'm admittedly not familiar with exactly how it goes, but it's very clean for us where the top 10 will graduate onto the LPGA Tour the following year. So this past season, we played 23 times for a record $4 million in prize money. The first time we passed the $4 million threshold in the history of the tour, and we played in 14 different states. And I think once again we have a good graduating class. You obviously don't know how they're going to perform at the next level until they get there, but in terms of our recent graduating classes, we've had a lot of success where of the sort of the 10 players that we've graduated the last couple of years, 9 have managed to maintain their LPGA Tour status, which is, pretty impressive when you sort of look at the caliber of talent that they're playing against when they arrive on that level. So recent graduates are having a lot of success, and so we're excited for sort of the successes of some of our recent graduates, as well as the class that will be graduating onto the tour next year.
Yeah, definitely some great young ladies coming up through the Symetra Tour ranks. And, of course, Cindy and I had the pleasure of interviewing many of them throughout the season, of course, the winners, and then wrapped up with many of the Volvic Race for the Card winners as the season ended. So we definitely had – and we'll talk about one particular that I want to get to a little bit later on. But let me just ask you one other question, then, Cindy, I'm going to throw over to you for some questions for Mike as well. You mentioned that you had 23 tour events this season on the Symetra Tour, and you actually had a pretty long stretch at one point. I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, 7 or 8 tournaments that were back-to-back. So it made for a very tough season, I'm sure, for some. Did you get any feedback from the players about the schedule? Did some of them say that, hey, boy, that's a lot of events back-to-back like that, or what was the overall response?
I'm not sure I heard it as much from the players as the staff. It's one of those where, in an ideal world, we'd play, 3 weeks on and take 1 week off, and 3 weeks on and take 1 week off. So that's kind of the way you set up the schedule, or try to make some semblance of that, without necessarily being that specific. But then all of a sudden, let's say you set it up for 3 weeks on and 1 week off, and then, a new tournament opportunity comes, and it fits the geographic schedule of being between 2 of those 3 week blocks, and you slide it in because it seems logical, and next thing you know, you have 7 weeks in a row. So, it can happen and sort of sneak up on you very quickly. But we sort of look at it from a couple of ways. Is one, when you get to the LPGA Tour, there are stretches where you'll have the opportunity to play 7 weeks in a row, and you've got to learn how to balance, what is my body doing? How do I feel? I can't afford to play all of these weeks. Cindy, as a, former tour player, can speak to this better than I, but you just have to learn the cadence of what your body can do. And so that's part of it, is learning how to say, okay, within these 7 weeks, I'm going to play 3-1, and I'm going to take 1 week off while other people are playing, and I'm going to have to sort of learn how to deal with the mental whatever of people passing you on the money list while you're resting, because that's better for you, and you'll play better over the course of the next 3 weeks. So there's that. But within that, again, if players are almost forced at some level to take a week or 2 off to recuperate and rest, it provides opportunities for other players who might not be getting into field. So, that's right. Good for us that players do choose to take off, because now there's players who are getting into those tournaments who might not be getting in at other parts of the year, and maybe by virtue of getting into that event and playing well, they can reshuffle themselves in. So, I think it's, would it be easier for the players if we just scheduled this cadence of 3 on and 1 off the whole season? Without question, because they don't then have to make any tough decisions, right? They just play 3 on and take 1 week off, which is about what players like to do. So I'm not saying I would love to tell you that I'm doing it intentionally to teach them how to do this, but it just sort of happens, it just sort of happens through osmosis.
Right.
And whenever somebody comes on with a new tournament opportunity that's for a big purse and a good opportunity for the players, you slide it into the schedule, and then hope next year that you can sort of adjust the geography or do some things to make it better. So it's kind of like every schedule is a little bit of a work in progress, where you kind of we have the pretty good framework of a geographic flow, and then sometimes a new tournament comes on that doesn't quite fit, but you kind of work around it, knowing that that'll buy you a year to sort of recalibrate the schedule so it does work better for everybody, including the staff, like I said.
Yeah.
Mike?
No, and it makes perfect. Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
I remember, when I played, we had between 35 and 40 tournaments a year. So you had to make those choices, and being, bottom girl on the totem pole, I was glad to have the opportunity to get in the events, although I was fully exempt at that point. The catch, though, is that there have been seasons on the tour where we didn't have that many events. So it's kudos to you and Mike Wan and the whole staff for creating the opportunities, which is what your job is, to create economic opportunities for women to make a living playing and teaching the game of golf. So kudos to you for creating so many events so that they have to be big girls and make decisions and learn how to, make a schedule so they don't get worn out and are able to play well the whole year.
Well, yeah, thank you. Like I said, I wish it was intentional, but as you said, we're always out there looking for the next new opportunity, and but that is part of what they have to learn to do playing. Because you'll have a bunch of there are certain players like Brooke Henderson, I believe, plays every event. Nobody knows how she does it, but that she just manages to do it. But she's obviously one of the younger players. But there'll probably come to a time where she starts realizing that she might play better overall if she took a week off. But right now she's able to do it. But other players, mentally aren't be able to keep it on for 3 and 4 weeks at a time. I can't keep it together mentally for 9 holes. So, I mean, I can't imagine doing it, for, 72 holes for 4 weeks in a row. That's for sure.
So let me ask you this. What if someone was interested in being a corporate partner or sponsoring a Symetra Tour event or an LPGA Tour event or possibly even a Legends Tour event? What would be the first step they would need to take?
It's really just contacting us, and the thing that we've had to do on the LPGA is I would say we have to work a little bit harder for our kills, so to speak, and so we don't sort of start into any sort of preconceived notion with our sponsors. We don't sort of say, oh, let's shove them into this or shove them into that opportunity. A lot of it's just sitting down with the sponsor and listening to what they want to do. I mean, there's been situations where a sponsor has walked through the door and said, hey, we really want this, and we really want to do this tournament, and we say, okay, well, what do you want to get out of it? And they explain sort of what they want to get out of it, and we say, it sounds like what would be better than a tournament might be a LPGA.com advertising package, or rather than spending the big money for an LPGA tournament, maybe you do a Symetra Tour event, but you use some of the additional money to, do a little TV package on the Golf Channel or whatever the case might be. So, I would just encourage anybody who's interested in doing anything with the LPGA to just contact us. Myself, I'm in charge of the Symetra Tour, but sell LPGA assets. As you know, I've worked some opportunities for the Legends Tour into some of our work, and so we're really we've tried to, as well as girls golf and things of that nature. So the one thing that we've really tried to do in recent years is become a little bit more holistic in our sales approach. So maybe there isn't, as you mentioned, opportunities with the TNCP, bringing out maybe some of our members to events to help with coaching and things of that nature. So there's a lot of, there's really a lot of different ways that we can help corporations depending on the size of their budgets and what they're trying to achieve. It's, like I said, there people have come to us and said, I want to do a Symetra Tour event. And I'd say, well, that's not maybe necessarily best for what you want to do based on what you're telling me, and we'll present other options. So, just pick up the phone, contact us, and we're not going to try to pigeonhole into something that we want to sell, because we want the partners to be around with us for a long time, and that's what really helps. You're talking about building out the schedule. When I started with the Symetra Tour, my first full year was so my first sort of half year was 2012, and we went through a situation where it was something like we added 5 events, which you would think normally would be amazing, but we lost 6. So we went from a situation where if you lose 5 tournaments and you don't go up, you have sort of a fundamental problem. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I know how this story ends if we don't sort of shore up our business. So, that half year I spent making sure that the 15 tournaments that we had, that they all stayed with us. So the following year, we had, we were able to grow from there. So we've been able to build Mike on the LPGA side, and then myself on the Symetra Tour side. The way we've been able to build is by making sure that we're taking care of the partners that we have. We're putting them in a position where the assets and whatever we provide them with is something that works for them. And now you can not worry so much about the fact that maybe you sold them something that was in our best interest and maybe not in their best interest.
That's great. Ted?
Let me ask you just a sort of a follow-up to that, Mike, if you don't mind. Obviously, besides the financial involvement that a sponsor has, what other, aspects of the sponsorship, what else does the sponsor do as far as their involvement in a tournament?
Yeah, so one of the ones that we put together last year, I'll use as an example. Zimmer Biomet. So they're a company that came on board last year as an official sort of, they make replacement hips, replacement knees, and they came to us about an opportunity to work on a tournament. And as we kind of dove into what they were looking to do, they were talking about, how they would like to have maybe a player endorsement. As we want to do a tournament, but we also think we want a player endorsement and all of this kind of thing. And we said, well, here's sort of the problem, whether you're Symetra Tour or LPGA Tour, that our players really aren't having knee and hip replacements. Like there's no sort of natural, player endorsement. Like, hey, I just got a new knee. Like it just doesn't happen, with sort of 25-year-old athletes. Or you certainly hope it doesn't, right? It might happen,
right.
But we were able to.
It's happening with the old farts.
Right. Well, that's So old farts is your term, not mine. But we were able to partner with Nancy Lopez, who was going through a knee replacement. And so what we did was we put together a package with Nancy, where Zimmer Biomet did her knee, so she has a Zimmer Biomet knee, and we also did the Zimmer Biomet did the teaching, the lesson zone that we have out at about a half a dozen tournaments. They've done some sponsorship of volunteer tents and things like that, because they were looking and saying, look, we understand sort of the demographic of golfers, that some of the people who might be volunteering for your tents are probably very much in sort of the demographic of people who may be thinking about knee and hip replacement but are too scared, and we want to be a part of the education of that. And then they also did a Symetra Tour event where they could award their employees for, and top producers and customers, et cetera, at one of our Symetra Tour events. So there was as well as some .com and things like that. So there were about 4 or 5 elements to their sponsorship. And when they walked through the door, they said, hey, we want to do this tournament. And I said, well, I'm not really sure. I know that's what you think you want to do, but I'm not really sure that's what you want to do. And so we actually came to them with this program that, like I said, had 4 or 5 different tentacles, and it was hugely successful this year. So, that's what we try to do is, listen and lead them to and a lot of the things that we put on the table were things they never considered, but, they're in the, knee and hip replacement business, and we're in the, golf sponsorship activation business. So, we look for sponsors who can sort of convey to us what they're trying to achieve, and we can hopefully put together a little basket of various things that work for them. So that's sort of an example that worked quite well this year.
That's great.
Very good. So, Mike, as I mentioned earlier, we interviewed the winners again this season from Symetra, and you guys have got some incredible players that have been playing out there this season. What, and I know you're busy doing other things, so you don't always get a chance to necessarily watch the tournaments itself, but what impresses you the most about many of the competitors that are coming through Symetra right now?
Well, I think that, just in the time from when like I said, my first full year was 2013, so I've been doing this, 7 or so years, and I would say that now there is a lot more consistency in the performance of our top players. So in the sort of the earlier years, you'd have players who would sort of play hot for 3 weeks, and then you'd wonder if they were in the tournament because they weren't even in the leaderboard for sort of the next 5 or 6. So it was the players were sort of very streaky. And, the more and more I look at the leaderboards over the last 3 and 4 years, the same players are sort of in that top 20 week after week, which is what you want, because that's ultimately what's going to create success on the once the players get to the LPGA Tour, is just being on the leaderboard consistently in the hunt, and not really worrying about making the cut. You don't want your players going into these tournaments thinking, oh, I just hope I make the cut to make some money. You want the players in there thinking, I can win this golf tournament, the sort of shoot for the moon and maybe you'll land amongst the stars. But just seeing those same sort of 25 players just always there in the hunt week after week, and it's made for it's made a pretty incredible sort of race at the end there with the Volvic race for the card and naming the top 10. So just the consistency amongst the top players, and what that does is it obviously shows how strong the competition is, and is that you have to be consistently good to finish in that top 10.
Yeah, and it was interesting too, Mike. This season we had a lot of first-time winners obviously coming through. And I think what was particularly interesting, and Cindy, you may recall this, a number of the players that, were really going through, and I hate to use this term, but kind of a slump here and there, just really struggled with their game. And suddenly they just sort of put that fear aside and just said, I'm going to go out and start having some fun. I'm just going to really enjoy myself and not put that undue pressure. And ultimately, either the next week or a few short weeks to follow, they won their first tour event. So they seem to, unload that baggage, if you will, of anxiety of trying to win it, their first event. And lo and behold, that's when it came through. And Cindy, I know, as I mentioned, we talked to a number of the ladies this year. What impressed you, Cindy, do you think, with many of the players?
I believe that, needless to say, they're starting younger and younger. And so many different countries have their own national teams. So players are more prepared and understand the importance of the mental game and nutrition and working out and their golf swing, and everybody's got a team. And none of that happened when I was younger. But the fact that they have, number one, junior golf programs that are amazing, and then they all play in college, which they get the best of the best. And now they have the Symetra Tour where they can really learn how to play, score, manage themselves. Where do I go? How do I do this? Do I stay in private housing? There are so many things that are basically harder than playing golf to learn how to manage themselves. So I think the maturity level is up there. And depending on the child or the student or the player, some of them have all kinds of pressure from outside forces. And once they understand that is not going to help them, I'll never forget Alejandra Laneza, who's been out there for quite a while and, gotten her card and played in the Olympics, and she's a great kid. And she said to us, and I'll never forget this, she goes, I finally said to myself, I'm going to go back and learn to enjoy playing golf like I did when I was a little girl, when I would go out and play golf all by myself at home. And what do you know? She won. So it's the maturity, it's the realizing what's important. And I think, it's great that the Symetra Tour exists because it is a training ground to be on the big stage. And that's why 9 out of 10 players are keeping their card, because the Symetra Tour exists.
Right, and that's a testament to, obviously, to Mike and the rest of the crew at the Symetra and the LPGA that do a fantastic job. And Mike, one of the other ladies that I want to bring up that really impressed me this season was Julieta Granada from Paraguay. She obviously made it into the Volvic Race for the Card group. And obviously, she also has played for her home country over the years. And I wanted to find out, because this is something, obviously, there's a lot of pride that goes in with that. And obviously the PGA Tour has, the Ryder Cup, and LPGA has the Solheim Cup. Is there a similar opportunity, do you think, or consideration on the Symetra Tour of having that type of an event at some point, maybe in the future?
Yeah, with Julieta being from Paraguay, obviously the Solheim Cup doesn't work for that. Obviously, she's not from Europe, and so we went and created, on the LPGA side, we created this the International Crown to try to give other countries the opportunity, 8 countries, the opportunity to sort of play and compete on the LPGA level. Obviously, for somebody like Julieta, the challenge is I don't think she has 3 other compatriots from Paraguay who could sort of qualify as a team from the Rolex rankings. But it is something that we've sort of considered at a very high level. But the challenge is, the players' turnover. One of the things that makes the Solheim Cup and the International Crown such a big deal is that, the players are fairly well-known entities, and it's an all-star game. So, being realistic too, okay, it would be cool if we created, let's just say, a Solheim Cup of the Symetra Tour, but, knowing that people won't necessarily identify with the players right now on the Symetra Tour because they haven't sort of made a name for themselves, sort of not sure it would have the same cachet. So when we kind of sit back and look at what the Symetra Tour's mission to do is, identify those 10 players and graduate them onto the LPGA Tour. It hasn't been sort of a focus because it's a little bit off mission, but would it be cool at the end of the season to create some sort of all-star team match made for TV? I mean, we've talked about it. It just hasn't sort of been a priority. If somebody were to drop it into our lap, would we say yes to it? Probably, but it's not something that we're actively looking to, check that box.
Yeah, and you're exactly right on your point. It's something that I think the logistically, there has to be a lot of things sort of fall into place to make it to be successful. Otherwise, it's really not worth pursuing at this point. One other thing I wanted to ask, and then Cindy, I'll turn it back over to you. Obviously, women's golf is becoming more and more popular, particularly with some of the younger contenders out there, and obviously playing on tours like Symetra and ultimately getting out to the LPGA and then obviously down the road the Legends Tour. But what about the teaching side? Is there an opportunity, you think, that Symetra can play in encouraging some of these girls to make transitions later on in their careers to teaching, or is this something that's really they have to decide from the get-go, this is what I want to do long term?
Oh, no, 100%. So there, and Cindy can probably speak to this a little bit better than I can, frankly. But one of the things that we've done over the time that I've been at the LPGA, and I say I really didn't have any part of it, but was to create sort of a faster teaching track for any of the players who want to come from whether it's the LPGA Tour or Symetra Tour and get their LPGA teaching and club professional license. And so that we've sort of wanted to facilitate that. I would say the biggest challenge in doing that from a tour standpoint, Symetra or LPGA Tour, is when players are comfortable having that conversation. Because, when they're out there right now, if you're on the Symetra Tour, you're trying to get to the LPGA. When you're on the LPGA, you're trying to stay on the LPGA. And as soon as you sort of admit, hey, maybe I'm looking at going into teaching, or maybe I should go become a college coach, you're probably done, and your competition knows You're probably done because you've already sort of made the mental transition. So it's hard, the players have to come to that realization on their own. And then when they do come to that realization, it's like, okay, who do they talk to and how do they go about it? Obviously, we can quickly facilitate them and say, here's who you need to talk to at the TNCP. But it's a tough thing. We were talking about it last night at dinner, sort of how do we transition players off of the LPGA or Symetra Tour into successful careers, whether it's in golf or not in golf. And for a lot of these players who've been dreamed of playing professional golf since the time they were maybe 10-year-old girls up until they become 25 or so, it's like, okay, well, this is all I dreamed of doing. Now what do I do? I went, for undergraduate economics, and I was planning to go to do Wall Street or whatever. So I kind of had like a career path, and I've sort of followed that career path. Well, for these young ladies, professional golf is their career path. So you get to the point where you're 25 and realize professional golf might not be in the cards for you long term. Transitioning, whether that's into coaching or something else, it's not an easy transition to make because it's a complete paradigm shift in everything they've been striving for the last 15 or 20 years. And like I said, Cindy's successfully made that transition, so it's better to speak to it. But we are 100% on board with helping players do that. We have a number of former Symetra players who are now, head coaches at various programs around the country. So we love it, and we love that universities are looking to the Symetra Tour players as a good building block for their programs in the future. But like I said, Cindy's probably better versed at sort of how a player can make that mental transition.
Right. And Cindy, let me just ask you just before. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Cindy.
Side note, I would love to be able to create a course with these kids with all the assessments and stuff. I'm certified in behavior motivation, so let's create something to help these kids, whether they're ready for it or not. We could call it something that disguises, so they can learn who am I? What do I really like to do? What am I motivated by? Because we all know not everyone's going to make it. And you're absolutely right. Once they start looking out the window, it's like their belief is gone. It's over. So if we could transfer that knowledge and their dreams and their wishes and their motivation into something that would help them beyond playing, that would be amazing. I'd love to be involved in that.
Excellent.
Yeah, Cindy, I guess the thing that I'm thinking of in my mind, and I don't know if this is, I'm sure there's a lot of things happening right now, Cindy, but what I'm thinking of is, maybe addressing at a much earlier stage in these young girls' lives so that they understand there are opportunities, because as you both have pointed out, not everybody's going to make it out on tour, and there's nothing wrong with giving it your best shot. But I'm wondering if there's something in place, or if something should be in place, that when these young girls first get introduced to golf, if they're given that opportunity to say, hey, you know what, yeah, you can go out and try to be a player, but there's also this opportunity or other opportunities as well. What are your thoughts there, and is there such a beast, if you will, right now available to a lot of young girls?
Is that for Cindy?
Yes, Cindy, I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought Yeah, sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I thought it was for Mike. So, no, I don't think there is an opportunity, but here's what I believe might be the best way. Once these players become exempt on the tour or they become a member, maybe we onboard them with some of these assessments and maybe a couple of debrief calls for them to be able to become aware of who they are. And the reason I say this is because, so many of the players are shy and quiet. Some are competitive control freaks. And, you've got a Tiger Woods, you've got a Christina Kim, who's, everybody loves her. You've got, I just think of my husband, Alan Miller, Ernie Els, Jason Duffner, shy, quiet, sit in the corner. And then you've got the nerds that want to know all the numbers, like Bernard Langer. So I think the more they know themselves, the better they will be able to play. My husband, again, it's not like it was then, but, he was afraid to go to pro-am parties because he had to talk to people, and so we almost need to help them on board to help them understand what their life is going to be like. And I know you have media training, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that might be the first step in saying, 5 years after they've played and they're like, okay, I'm done now. Well, remember what you did when you started? Let's go back and look at those results rather than, well, now you suck and you have to quit and let's go somewhere else. Maybe if we could, go back to what it started with, that it wouldn't be such a shocker for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think, giving those opportunities like that right from the get-go, and then, again, either way, whether they're pursuing a playing career to start things off, at least, as you said, Cindy, with those assessments sort of in their pocket, that's something that they can reflect back on or be directed back on. Mike, let's talk about in the last...
I just have to make one
more
comment. We've done a lot of training with college golf teams, and we trained Arizona State's team when Azahara Munoz was on the team. And we went down to Scottsdale and did these sessions with everybody, and they all learned who they were. And I thought, oh, my God, this girl's amazing, and she's awesome, and she becomes this star. So we go to an event like 4 years later, and I run, and it might have been Rochester, this was a long time ago. And so I go up to her, and I'm like, oh, hi, do you remember me? And she's looking at me like, no, who the hell are you? And she turned and looked at Alan, and her face totally lit up. And I'm like, I can't believe you remember him and you don't remember me. Well, that's because they're so much the same. So she absolutely was, comparing herself to him and thought, oh, here's my nice friend, and here's this witch over here, which I thought was really funny. So it's amazing what they can learn and how they can get along better.
Alan's got some mojo. It's got some good mojo. Mike, I wanted to also give you an opportunity to talk about next season, 2020. Of course, you guys are all getting ready for that now and have been, I'm sure, as the season went on, because you always have to be sort of ahead of the game. What can we expect in 2020? Any new events coming up that you can let us in on, or what's going to be happening?
Sure. So it looks like we've already announced one new event in Utah, the Circling Raven Championship, and it's actually in Idaho, which will be the furthest northwest we've ever played with the tour. But it's the number one ranked golf course in the state of Idaho. It's at the Coeur d'Alene Casino Hotel Resort. And I was out there visiting when we went out for the media announcement. It is an absolute gem of a golf course. I don't believe the Symetra Tour has ever played on the number one golf course in any state. So that was certainly a nice addition and feather in our cap, and a nice opportunity for our players. They're going to actually love it there. And then we've got another, looks like about 4 new events that will be coming on for next year. And we'll obviously want to announce them in due time, but on their timelines. But looking to add a couple events out west to help bolster sort of our West Coast swing at the early part of the season, and then some other events at other parts of the country that sort of match with the geographic flow of the schedule. So we're looking at probably 4 or 5 new events for next year, and that's kind of what we're focused on between now and the end of the year is solidifying the schedule. But comfortably we'll be playing for more than $4 million again this year, and it's been a nice little run of being able to add some bigger events. As events go off the schedule and we bring on newer events, they're coming on at bigger purses, and so that's obviously great for the ladies as well.
Yeah, well said. When do you typically? I know you're always in that mode of developing opportunities and things like that. But when typically do you start working on 2020, as an example? So you're in 2019 now. Is that pretty much, you're doing both in the same year, kind of getting ready for the new season while still maintaining what you're currently doing? I know that 2019 is over now, but is that typically how it goes?
Yeah, as soon as we announce the 1 year schedule, we're on to the next year's schedule. So we obviously have the team that goes out and is running the events from week to week. So it's kind of one of those where I am responsible for putting together the schedule, and then I sort of hand off the schedule to our operations team and the rules officials and the folks who go about actually doing everything on a 7 days a week type process. So as soon as that happens, we're immediately focused on the next year's schedule. But as with anything, these things a lot of times come down to the sort of the very last thing. One of the events I'm working on right now is just somebody who contacted us just a couple weeks ago. So it's right. It always seems like there's sort of 1 or 2 November surprises where all of a sudden somebody says, hey, what do we need to do to get on the schedule? The good news or bad news is when I a couple years ago when I started, we only had 15 tournaments. Everybody could kind of just pick and choose what they wanted, and we didn't really have to worry about a geographic flow because we would just take all comers at that point. But now when you have a schedule that'll be played between 23 and 25 times over a sort of a 30, low 30s week window, there's really not a lot of availability, which is obviously the point you want to get to, where you have to say, hey, let's focus on next year. So it's been, success breeds success as more people see, people coming on board. They want to be involved with it. We obviously Mike's experienced it on the LPGA side, and we've seen it on the Symetra Tour side too. Is both tours are, as the players that we're graduating are having more success on the LPGA Tour, it's bringing more attention to the tour and more interest. So we've been definitely fortunate with a nice little run these last couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. We've noticed on the tour as well, just even interviewing some of the girls coming up as winners over the last few seasons. We've really noticed a whole new energy, if you will. So it's great to see such expansion like that. Cindy, any final thoughts or questions for Mike?
No, just thank you for what you do. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. Well, it's as I like to say to people, obviously we're in the sales business, and I always say if you believe in what you're selling, you're not really selling. You're just sort of telling the story of what it's all about. And so being a part of the LPGA family is they've got a lot of passionate people headquartered in Daytona Beach who care a lot about furthering the careers of these ladies. And so it's nice to go to work every day believing in the mission of the organization you work for. So I'm blessed to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for what you do.
Yeah, Mike, you do a fantastic job, and we thoroughly appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your thoughts and giving us updates along through the season. So we obviously invite you back again early next season at the beginning to help send things off, and then for another wrap-up of 2020. So keep up the great work, and thank you for all that you do, and thank you for spending some time this morning here on the Women of Golf.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thank you for having our players on throughout the season and helping to tell their stories. I mean, it's it all kind of it's like my most hated thing. The saying "it takes a village," but it really does. It's like the more all of these little touch points that people have to the Symetra Tour, the LPGA Tour, Legends Tour, and these players, sort of the rising tide lifts all boats. So we appreciate you all playing a huge part in helping tell these stories and helping us grow the tours.
Well, we're grateful for it as well.
Season, Mike.
Yeah, have a great holiday season, and we look forward to having you back next season.
Sounds good. You too.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks. All right, that was Mike Nichols, the Chief Business Officer of the Symetra Tour, sharing a wrap-up of the 2019 season and a little sneak peek into 2020. Really, it's just amazing, Cindy, when you think about it, all that goes into putting these tournaments together and coordination and so forth. And I know that you have a great respect for people like Mike who do what they do.
Absolutely.
And he obviously has a mutual respect for you for all that you do, which is great as well. All right, before we wrap up, Cindy, just a couple of quick things. First off, I know we've got a great promotional spot, so just quickly set that up. We'll play that, and then just a couple of comments after the promo, and then we'll close off.
Well, needless to say, the LPGA and the Tour and the Symetra Tour and the Legends Tour and the LPGA Teacher Division, they are such a huge proponent and help people learn to use the game of golf as a business tool. So have a listen.
Everyone knows business deals are made on the golf course. Knowing how to act is just as important as how you hit it. As an LPGA professional and corporate trainer, I offer workshops, seminars, and executive retreats to teach you how to do both. From the back nine to the boardroom, Improve Your Team from the Inside Out, or Golf 101 for Executives might be the perfect fit for your team. Maybe it's time to make some deals on the course. For more information, go to cindymillerinc.com.
All right, great message. Thank you as always, Cindy. Remember to go to cindymillerinc.com, and you can reach out to Cindy there. All of her contact information is available, and definitely you want to do that. Just a couple of quick program notes. Next week, of course, is going to be Thanksgiving, so we will not be doing a show next week, but we will be returning the following week, which I believe is December 3rd, for 3 more shows this season before we wrap up. So there'll be a show December 3rd, 10th, and the 17th will be our final shows for the 2019 season. So we're going to try to go out with a bang, if you will. And then we'll be taking an extended break through Christmas and also the month of January as we prepare for the 2020 season. And our first show back will be, I believe, February 4th in 2020. So we want to take, again, this opportunity to thank Mike Nichols for joining us and all of Zach Sapanik from the Symetra Tour, who's helped guide the young ladies onto the show as they've won tournaments throughout the 2019 season. Thank you to all the men and women at both the LPGA and the Symetra Tour for all of the great work that you do, and for thanking you for making us a part of your team and allowing us the opportunity to bring some well-deserved exposure to these young ladies. And Cindy, as I said many, many times, kudos to you for all the work that you do in helping to rise and elevate women's golf. So on that note, on behalf of Cindy Miller and I, happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks right here on the Women of Golf Show. God bless everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks, Ted. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.